A lot of people might not know this, but ERA actually started out as an organisation called WomenSpeak. Back in the late 1990s, the federal government decided that they wanted to change the way they operated in relation to women's organisations.
When the YWCA took on the WomenSpeak contract, it was in the context of advocacy in the sector would be supported by having centralised points for the women's sector to be able to present more unified policy proposals to government.
The whole Beijing conference was what really pulled it all together. And then post-Beijing, I think there was even more decision by government that they needed to have the voices of women involved in policy, because we made commitments at the international stage, and it's very easy to say that it's how you make it work.
For some time there'd been a pattern of annual meetings of funded organisations with the minister, and the minister to whom I was working had found that experience negative, unproductive, frustrating, and was concerned that it was exactly the same for the women's organisation. So there was no win on either side. And she wanted something better. So it was my task to work out that something better. We developed the concept of the secretariats, and it was clear that it was important to represent the diversity and unique difficulties for women, and one organisation would not necessarily be the best way to do that. And we did do some work on how best to represent the diversity of women's interests, and hence the emergence of the concept of several secretariats.
In 1999, the Office for the Status of Women started the process of setting up 3 secretariats, which later became 4 secretariats. One of those secretariats was WomenSpeak, and it was auspiced by the YWCA of Australia.
So one of the issues for the secretariats was that those very small groups had all received a small amount of money from the office, some of them over some long time. And I have described it as 2 drops out of a lemon, really. It was enough to exist, to run a tiny, probably voluntary nonetheless, secretariat, but they gave them no support to be powerful or influential. And so in consolidating the organisations into secretariats, we also, of course, consolidated the funds, and the contract with the organisation that emerged as the secretariat was to transfer the funds in a larger fund envelope for them to do a much more considered range of activities that would contribute both to their member organisations and to public policy. So there was a lot of angst about the reallocation of funds.
What we call the WomenSpeak network came out of quite a difficult moment in the history of the Australian women's movement. There was a point where we woke up one day and discovered that 3 of the national women's organisations that lived in my house had been unfunded. It was a scary moment for the women's movement. We thought we were losing what generations before us had won. What we were trying to do was bring people together to strengthen the movement. We did try to throw the net wide. We slowly kind of gathered people together and built this structure that was about, I guess, respecting where every organisation came from, but looking for those points of commonality where we could strengthen each other's work and build on that.
And then in 2002, WomenSpeak and the YWCA of Australia held a large meeting of 60 organisations over 2 days, in which they thrashed out what the new organisation might look like.
First meeting was very much about, I guess, trying to demonstrate good faith, trying to articulate a model and think through a model that would strengthen the work of individual organisations and that wouldn't kind of stifle people's work, because we were trying to say, can we do this together? Is there a way that this will help people? Can we trust each other? Can we work together?
It was a genuinely curious atmosphere, but I think people in the room appreciated the wise, good officers and the feminist politic that they were bringing, and their efforts to come up with an arrangement that would enable the participation of as many organisations as possible.
WomenSpeak officially started in 2002 following that meeting with 24 member organisations. They held regular member meetings to determine their advocacy priorities. And they worked on a whole range of issues, from health to paid parental leave, childcare, women's leadership, the effects of work choices on women. And they prepared briefings for the Office of the Status of Women on the Commission on the Status of Women each year. By 2008, WomenSpeak had 38 members, but it had become clear that there were problems with the model.
We were also always very aware that there were gaps in the network.
Migrant and refugee women, women of colour, Indigenous women, as well as the service providers were very vocal and very legitimate in noting that the National Women's Alliances did not demonstrate and capture and show women's experiences in the 2000s of Australia.
The Minister for the Status of Women wanted to see changes to the model, which led to the establishment of the National Women's Alliances in 2010.
We got meetings at the various states and we formed organisation, the Network of Migrant Refugee Women in each of the states, and we came together as a group, when the funding for the alliances came to be, because we have to have a statewide, Australia-wide thing.
We wanted to have alliances that had more leadership positioning, that had more personality in their own right. We wanted to strengthen civil society, and of course Tanya, being the Minister, was right with that.
We have such a diverse community of Australian women, and all of their voices deserve to be heard. And my aim in setting up the alliances in the way that I established them was really to hear from the broadest range of women, hear about their experiences, their lives, and their solutions for what matters to them. What I wanted was well-funded women's policy development and advocacy that came from a grassroots women's movement. That was my objective.
The consortium model evolved to the alliances model with the 6 alliances, with 3 population specific and 3 thematic.
There were some aspects of describing ourselves as WomenSpeak that didn't capture all of the work that we were doing or that we wanted to do. So I feel that creating the new Identity of Equality Rights Alliance was really forward thinking and was really thinking about where is it that we want to go, where do we want to be in terms of gender, sexual diversity, men and women, and equality for rights for all people.
We also wanted to make sure that the skills that we had learned in doing the work that we'd been doing over the last few years, we wanted to make sure that we were sharing those skills and empowering lots of other women's organisations in the community to be able to do these things for themselves, so that there's less reliance on any one particular group to be able to do that advocacy work. So it was about trying to skill up the entire women's movement so that we all knew how to use these things more effectively.
And it opened up the opportunity for a lot of women to become involved in the women's movement. And also the introduction of the young women, the YWAG. So getting younger, newer voices in was really important.
One of the biggest benefits that I see ERA in bringing to the gender equality space in Australia is that we recognise that women is not a homogenous group, but rather a really complex, diverse facet of people in our communities. And so having member organisations from across Australia representing different needs, different priorities, but with that shared sense of we want to make Australia a better place for everyone, including women from all walks of life.
I think that's one of the major strengths of the alliances, the fact that they bring those women's networks together. My hope of the women's alliances were that they brought that unity, not always total agreement. Of course, you couldn't get all those organisations and women together and have them all agreeing. Though amazingly, they often did.
ERA has now got 64 member organisations, and it's got a long history of advocacy at the federal level on the federal budget, on gender responsive budgeting, on the Commission on the Status of Women, in the areas of housing, sexual and reproductive rights, welfare, investment in the care economy, lots of other stuff. But none of that would be possible without the support and the participation of the members. Although the Secretariat keeps things kicking over, the policy positions and the energy and the feminist framework and the thinking, they all come from the members. In the nearly 20 years we've had so far, we've achieved so much. But it's only been possible because the members have continued to support the model, and because our sister alliances have worked with us so generously, and because the YWCA has provided us with such a stable home. I think those are the critical elements of our success so far. The thing about evolution is that it doesn't stop. It keeps going. And because the alliance model is so flexible, it's inevitable that ERA is going to keep evolving, particularly in the face of challenges like COVID-19. So here's to the future.